This recording is protected by copyright. No part may be reproduced without the prior permission of the University of South Australia.
Good evening. My name is Jacinta Thompson and I'm the Executive Director and Events and Exhibitions Producer of the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre. I would like to acknowledge that the University of South Australia meets on the land of the Kaurna people. We wish to express our respect for the Kaurna people, their elders and ancestors, and acknowledge the spiritual and cultural relationship the Kaurna people have with their traditional land. I extend that respect to Aboriginal peoples from other areas of South Australia and Australia. I would like to welcome you all here tonight on behalf of the Hawke Centre and the University of South Australia for our final Perspectives presentation for 2020, an initiative developed by the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre, ACE Open and Guildhouse. Perspectives is a series of thought-provoking lectures inviting leading artists, makers and cultural thinkers to South Australia to engage with compelling ideas currently shaping our world. Our 2021 program will be announced early next year. Tonight we will hear from artist David Capra as he presents his lecture titled Teena Knows Best. This event is being recorded and a video will be available on the Hawke Centre website. We encourage you to bring this to the attention of friends and colleagues who could not join us online tonight. It is now my pleasure to welcome Patrice Sharkey, Artistic Director of ACE Open, who will introduce David Capra. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce David Capra, who will present our final talk for the Perspective series in 2020. Performance artist David Capra is known for his collaborations with dachshund Teena. In 2016, David and Teena appeared on the 9 Network's Today show to promote their fragrance, OD Wet Dog. In 2015, Teena's Bathtime was launched at the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia's Jackson Ballroom, where visitors related to Teena's experience around anxiety, as Teena doesn't quite enjoy bath time. In 2018, they performed The Long and Short of It, Life Lessons from Art Dog Teena to an audience of 5,000 at TED by Sydney, answering the question, what makes a dachshund the perfect muse, in an article for The Guardian newspaper. The two featured in Genevieve Bailey's documentary, Happy Sad Man, following the lives of 5 men managing their internal worlds. And finally, last year, David and Teena collaborated with Kaldor Projects, producing a series of Teena Takes On educational videos and Kaldor Studio Project at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. So now I'd like to welcome David. Thank you.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on Cabral land here in Fairfield of the Darug Nation, and like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of this land where you may be listening from, and also like to extend that acknowledgement to First Nations people listening to our talk as well. So my name is David Capra. I'm an artist based here in Sydney, and unfortunately, Teena is not here. So you might even be asking, what is Teena? Where is Teena? Who is Teena? Hopefully this will all unfold as I talk. Teena is my 10-year-old dachshund and my collaborator. She normally doesn't do much of the talking. I do most of the talking. So we should be able to get through this without Teena. She's up the coast in Maxville. She lives between Fairfield and Maxville. And so currently she's having a bit of respite time out on the green paddocks, and she shares them with kangaroos. So I'm quite jealous. Here stuck in the suburbs. I do have a stand-in though. A friend crocheted a little Teena for me here. So Teena will be here in spirit. She'll be looking on. And so let's get started maybe by talking a little bit about Teena. Teena's approach is nose-led. There's an intuition which I've tried to kind of listen to, and I'll try and articulate that as I talk, and it definitely has taught me empathy. maybe I should talk about our dress. So when you encounter our work, it's quite visual what you see. You see myself in whites. So what I refer to as my whites is a dinner shirt that's usually buttoned right up to the top, footy shorts, white spandex, and Teena will often accompany me with a white collar and a little medallion. And we describe ourselves as an absorbent tower, a walking absorbent tower that sort of absorbs what's around us, the stories. And we like to present the familiar back to people as well. The clothing represents, well, the clothing sort of also is taken from 70s performance art. And we also see ourselves as the gallery wall. We're inspired by sitcoms where they are filmed in front of a live audience, and then it reaches new heights of hilarity when these sitcoms then enter the real world with hidden cameras and these interactions with real people. And a good example of this is the BBC's Little Miss Jocelyn. So I guess we see what we were doing, because I started off in the gallery in Ari's, and I thought that, you know, only a limited amount of people are seeing what I'm doing here, and I would like to really get that out into the open and bring the gallery and that bubble and the bubble that it is into the world outside. Also inspired by situational comedies, particularly screwball comedies like Harvey and Bringing Up Baby. I definitely love cinema, and that definitely comes into the work that I make. Well, where did it all begin? I have many influences, like everyone, and I thought it would make sense to start from the beginning. Here's a work called Prayers for a Sausage Dog. So basically this is made of like toilet rolls and a mold that I found of a dog's face, and I was making gemstones out of plasticine. So this ad hoc kind of thing is something that I used to turn. It was an effigy of a sausage dog that it involved an action of turning in my performances. The wheel action, the tail was something that I would spin, and then the head would actually spin in unison. And I saw it as this idea and this notion of intercession. And so I had a Ukrainian grandmother who kind of would take me to Ukrainian Orthodox church, and it was very ritual based, of course, and smells. And then I was also brought up by we spent a lot of time with my Italian side, my nonna and nonno, who were Roman Catholic as well. But when my parents divorced, my mother, because I'm an only child, we kind of went on this spiritual road trip together. And so I was exposed to all these interesting kind of behaviours as a child. And really, we landed in the intercessory in the Pentecostal churches. So speaking in tongues, rolling on the floor, exorcisms were all part of a normal week. And I mean, I remember a key story where one of my relatives, we were leaving the service, and we got in the car and they just fell in the gutter because they were so lost in the spirit they couldn't even drive. So these sort of very comical, bizarre things used to be part of my life. And I really wanted to unpack it and understand what I had just experienced. And also felt like it was a little bit of post-traumatic stress that I might have been experiencing from being brought up in this very dynamic atmosphere. So I was invited to be part of a project called Workout at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Sydney, and I made a work called Wizard of Oz Wizard of Oz Intercession, that's the word. And so it occurred from 10 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and it was cyclic, and it was like a psychotic break, really. What unfolded was myself on this platform that looked like some sort of altar, and there was all this Wizard of Oz, because I love the Wizard of Oz. It's been kind of with me all my life, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well later. But it was a way of introducing Teena to the world. So on the hour, every hour from 10 to 5, Teena would appear behind the green curtain and come out. And we would do this dance, and I would sing in operatic tongues, which was a learnt behaviour from childhood. So it was this big bellowing, nonsensical words. I was really interested in confusing an audience, you know, not making things so clear. But I also was really interested in the idea of creating a narrative that would be built upon over the course of my practice. So I was really interested in people learning that I was making works of prayers for a sausage dog, but then one day a sausage dog did appear, and that people could kind of, you know, celebrate this with me. One day my friend Rosie Deacon, who's an artist here in Sydney, she said to a bunch of our friends, "Does anyone want a sausage dog? My family back in in Nyngan have one in the Bogan Shire." And I'm like, yes, that would be me. I'm getting my sausage dog. So Teena arrived, and slowly she kind of became infused in my work. So that's the Wizard of Oz work. Then we have a work called Birthing Things in the Spirit, the Water Birth. So this work was in collaboration with Power at Campbelltown Arts Centre, part of their dance program, and it involved me going to aqua aerobic classes that had been established for 18 years down at the Eagle Vale pools, and this group of women and one man would take part in this, you know, aerobics program in the pool. And I came in and I said, I would like to make a synchronized swimming work with you all. How do you feel about that? And they all looked puzzled, and, you know, there were two twins that were in their 90s. I think they were 94, and they kept saying to me, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I said, no, please just trust me. They ended up finding it too much, and well, they were most concerned about the performance was at night, and they don't travel at night, so they didn't take part in it. But we really connected over our love for Esther Williams, who was a synchronized swimmer and a big Hollywood superstar back in the 50s and 40s, and she made a film called $1 Million Mermaid, which was based on a Marrickville woman called Annette Kellerman, who's said to have invented synchronized swimming. And so we, over the course of a couple of weeks, I would do their aerobics routine, and then I'd hijack the last kind of 25 minutes of the class, and we would develop this routine. And I was really interested in the idea of birthing. I even consulted a midwife, and because I felt like the work that I was making was really about birthing. And I was also, you know, I always was really quite perplexed by my belly. I would often dress to hide my belly like I'm doing now today. But when I put on these whites, they're really there for everybody to see, you know, and this belly became like this pregnant belly was this way of building confidence to make and create and birth friendships and birth ideas and work collaboratively, because I had worked in community cultural development for a long time and never brought my contemporary art practice, never brought these two worlds together. So it was really confronting, because I felt like, oh no, the art that I make in galleries need to be high art. They can't be community. And I'm really glad that I confronted that idea, because I felt like it really brought joy into the work that I made. And it was all, I remember that we sat down with some of the team of the synchronized swimmers, who are incredible people, who really have lived an incredible life. They're in their 80s and late 80s. And they said that since making this work with me, that they have been saying yes to things they never thought they would. And I was so amazed and moved that that they would, in the stage of their life, consider doing really bold things. Like they were saying that they were making their own routines and they were performing in front of people. And so it was just wonderful. And so another work that I've made is called the Ministry of Handshakes. So that does appear in the work of the pool work. The Ministry of Handshakes is a large 2.5 metre arm prosthetic that I put on my arm and I shake people's hands with. So that derived from an encounter with Elizabeth on a Sydney train. Now, Elizabeth felt her calling in life was to shake people's hands, and on the train specifically. She had a vision of doing it, and in a dream, and then started doing it in the real world. And I witnessed this. I saw Elizabeth put out her hand and notion, shake my hand. And this businessman was like, I could see that I couldn't work out what was happening. And I thought, oh, he must know her, but he obviously doesn't remember. But then something really strange happened. She then turned to the person beside him and also shook their hand. And I thought, wow, this person is shaking everyone's hand, not saying any words, just looking into someone's eyes and shaking their hand. And I just thought, this is so beautiful. She was transforming something so everyday, like going on the train, into theatre. And it was done with such purpose. And I was so inspired by her. I remember encountering Elizabeth at a station once on a separate occasion, and I said, I'm really inspired by what you do. Can I take your number down? Can I interview you or get to know what you're doing? And I then was commissioned to create, a little later, I was a guest editor of Das Super magazine, and it was all based on Western Sydney, where I live here in Sydney. And I wanted to put Elizabeth on the cover, and I couldn't find her. I was looking for Elizabeth. I was looking for Elizabeth everywhere for months. And I'm trying to remember what happened. I encountered her again. And then I said, look, your phone number keeps changing, Elizabeth. Please, let's keep in contact. I really want to interview. So I interviewed her, and all the while, and then I discovered something extraordinary. Firstly, she handed me a persimmon, which is my favourite fruit, when we met for the interview, which I thought was extraordinary. And then she proceeded to tell me, I asked her, Elizabeth, what is it that you do for work? And she said, I actually work in a nursing home in Ashfield. And I said, oh. And then I said, what's the name of that? And she told me the name of it. And I said, I'm pretty sure my auntie goes there. I go there regularly to visit my great aunt, Zia Pira. And she said, Zia Pira? Zia Pira, I sing her to sleep every night. And I couldn't believe it. And Zia Pira actually passed away a week after that interview, and we were talking at the wake about Elizabeth, the extraordinary person that spent all her last moments with Zia Pira, and my family had bought her chocolate. So it was just so bizarre how I was looking. I just thought it was so incredible. I was looking for Elizabeth everywhere, and she was with my Zia Pira. Anyway, that's a long story. But I thought I would up it a notch, and I would make a 2.5 metre arm prop and shake people's hands with them. And it's a very comical vaudeville kind of interaction with people. I have all these kind of silly jokes, like I'm heavy-handed and so forth. But because it is quite a heavy hand, I get a bruise every time I use this thing. Then we have Teena's Bathtime. So this work was at the Museum of Contemporary Art, part of the Jackson Bella Room. So that is a space made specifically for people that identify with disabilities in mind. And it's up for a year. And people really develop a relationship with this work over time, because a lot of people visit it regularly. And this work, I feel, was a bit more back on the ground, a little less lofty and a little bit more kind of, I guess, less abstract. And I mean, I had to think about that as well, and think about audience. So the work became, I remember actually being asked at the museum, what is it that you're making? And there was a visitor to the museum, and I just thought on the spot and tried to kind of come up with an answer. Well, I think we'll give Teena a bath. And I had never thought about that idea until then. And then it came to the point where I had to present an idea, and I was thinking, I have nothing. I'm just going to go in there and talk about giving Teena a bath. So Teena doesn't quite like a bath, but with our help, she'll be just fine. That was one of the key lines that we had in the video. So what I made was a big zig-zagging sculpture of Teena. It was very furry. People could give this sculpture an imaginary bath. There were bubbles in the space, and Teena's face was animated on the video, but then there was a big kind of furry ear that would sit over the screen. And then there was what I called Teena Vision, a television that you could kind of peer in, a little bit like Play School, where you would go out into the world and experience different things in the world. So we met Dawn and Lucy. Dawn has autism and Lucy is her service dog. And we meet a few other people. And so when I was preparing the room, I thought, I love wallpaper. I want to make it like Pee-wee's Playhouse, this space. And I was photographing Teena, and there was this big looming camera over Teena, and she looked terrified in every photo. I went through them. There was 200. The very final one, I think it was 260. I said, I just got to accept Teena does approach the world with caution. And she does look, I mean, she looks very, in the image that is printed in the wallpaper. I actually have it up here in my house. I just put it up, some little bits. And Teena looks present. She's very present, but she's cautious. And then it was really interesting because audiences really identified with Teena as anxiety, and the work became about overcoming anxiety. So there was a lot of letters to Teena, that were encouraging Teena to take a bath because it will be good for her. She won't smell and be stinky, but also it's good to try new things. And it was really quite moving seeing audiences that had really connected with Teena. Most of them had never met Teena, but I remember when Teena was taken away, when the work was put down, it's probably not a good choice of words there, but when the work was taken away and put down, people were really had to be consoled because they really missed Teena. So another part of that work was developing a scent, because I wanted to think about all the sensory aspects of it. And so I worked with a Brisbane-based Damask Perfumery, where they went to Brisbane suburban homes and saw dogs getting bathed and smelled them. And because they have a whole catalogue and range of scents, they were like making notes of, a little bit of soil, a little bit of dog slobber, a little bit of, I wanted it floral. I kept saying, can we please make it more floral? Because it's pretty horrible, this smell. And it was great. People would come in and experience that smell as well. And I also kind of took it into another place, which I'll talk about in a moment. Then there's Fun Park. So Fun Park was, again, quite mainstream, little less abstract. I'm obsessed with Disneyland. I go there whenever I can. I really like spaces that are calculated and fashioned to really be escapes. And that's what I feel like, that's what my work provides people. And not far from Bidwell, which is where Fun Park took place in a car park, used to be in the 90s, Wonderland, Sydney's Wonderland, which was a theme park, Hanna-Barbera Land and so forth. And a lot of the locals had never been because it had closed down a decade before, a lot of the young children. So I wanted to bring a bit of that fun back. And I made this large kind of mascot-sized Teena that was, again, furry and cute and you could hug. And it was a very simple idea of people could be photographed with big Teena, and then they got like a nice little picture with a a frame that I designed, and people were able to take that home. In addition, I worked with Dorothy of Marylands. So the Wizard of Oz came back in. I met with Dorothy, who is said to have the largest Wizard of Oz collection in Australia. And she set up her collection with a few of my items in a space as well in the car park. So I was really, really, that kind of was the first beginning to a project that I called Sheer Fantasy, that I'll touch on later. Last year I worked with John Kaldor and the education team to create Puppy Love, a large sculpture of Teena that was inspired by Jeff Koons's Puppy Love that Kaldor brought over. I think it was one of the most popular public art projects to date here in Australia. And so it was, again, quite a simple idea of making this big sculpture of Teena. There were holes in there. You could pop out some paper flowers, write on them what you think of when you think of love and happiness, and then you plop them into the sculpture, and over time it would build up. And there was also a component where I would be in the space with Teena. Now, when she arrived at the Art Gallery in New South Wales, which is where it was quite a scene. It was like Madonna had arrived in the building. We would walk through the gallery and you would hear across the airways on all the walkie-talkies, Teena has entered the building. And, it was always a bit tricky with Teena. She can't really handle authority. I don't know if it's a Western Sydney thing or... So no black shoes. If she sees black shoes, she will react, she will bark, no uniforms, and definitely no security guards. So this made being at the art gallery quite difficult. But we would sit there and some people wouldn't really know what to do with us. They would ignore us. We would notion people over to come and greet Teena, and Teena was normally happy for a belly rub. Sometimes she wasn't. So I had to really kind of keep that in mind and keep Teena's needs in mind. We would leave sometimes. If she was in a bad mood, we'd only stay for 10 minutes or we would stay 25. But sitting there, I realised how unextraordinary the work that Teena and I make. It's so unextraordinary. In some way, I felt like we're in a Westfields as Santa, and people would come and sit on our lap or give Teena a pat, and it really... made me think about, what did it make me think about? It made me think about the potential of bringing art into spaces and bringing performance into spaces, and it doesn't have to be so spectacular. We are the art. We've kind of now live and breathe that we are performance artists, Teena and I, and we live it. And just that very notion of we being the art is something that I'm trying to unpack. Also, part of that project, we had Little Orange involved. So that's a big part of my life. Little Orange is a working studio at Campbelltown Arts Centre for artists that identify with disability. And I coordinate Little Orange. It's a 3-day a week for me. It's a big part of how I support my practice. And we had Joel come and present about love and happiness. Now, Joel loves Tony, the bus driver, and he actually made this incredible, he used a golf buggy and he covered it with cardboard and made this incredible paper truck that you could get in, and it was driven by Tony, and at the back of it was this incredible altar he had made with fairy lights of a watercolour of Tony. And then we had Imogen come in and talk about her love for creamy cocktails. And so that work was that was a really nice way into bringing a big part of my life into my practice, Little Orange Studios, bringing that into my work. We also created a series for children, a video series that was unpacking a lot of Kaldor's key works, and we also had a big dog picnic with brightly coloured edible dog treats, which was inspired by Meralda, the Spanish artist. that came in the 70s with Kaldor. I thought I'd like to talk a little bit more about media and the mainstream. And I think that I often ask, why is it that I keep going back to mainstream audiences, you know, and I feel like when I'm in these mainstream spaces like a TEDx talk or morning TV, I'm removing these safety blankets and understanding that you have between art audiences and classist in-jokes, and being in a different context, we might look a little bit more eccentric than normal, but it's I feel like it is more of a challenge for me. And I did a TEDx talk 2 years ago in front of 5,000 people. It was such a big emotional thing to do. Now, Teena knows what the sound of applause is. She knows that applause takes two hands, and she likes the sound of applause. I can see it in her body and her face. But we were waiting in the back, in the wings, about to get on stage for the TEDx talk, and she heard the applause, and she could perceive that it was not. It was like 5,000 people. I remember she kind of looked up at me and she's like, "What have you got me involved in?" But she was completely fine, actually. I was just rubbing her belly. It was me that really, my nerves were just shot. It took so long to recover. It made people uncomfortable, I think, because we started with a barking address. And, you know, we particularly used the TEDx format. You know, the slideshow, you know, TEDx in its nature is didactic and it's giving answers. And I feel that's the opposite to what Teena and I do. We did use a slideshow. I think one of the memorable slides was a slide of a Teena pad, which is an incontinence hygiene product, a Swiss-based hygiene product. And in it, at that slide, I explained that Teena was in fact named after one of these incontinence products, because so Teena is T-E-N-A, so I added an E. It's now, Teena's name is spelled T-E-E-N-A. And when she was a puppy, she used to greet people with a little tinkle, and she's also shaped like a pad as well. So that's where her name derived from. The people were so puzzled, and I wouldn't blame them. Then we've done the morning show on the TV. Like, we were given the 8:30 time slot, which is the highest rating time slot. And we went on and we promoted Odor Wet Dog. So I made that smell for Teena's Bathtime, but I wanted to bottle it, and I wanted it to kind of be a public relations exercise. I wanted to go out into the world and promote it and make people buy this horrible smelling thing, which I did get the perfumers to add a little bit more of floral accents in the perfume. And that Odor Wet Dog was commissioned by was commissioned by Westspace, and in partnership with the Melbourne Fashion Week as well. And I remember going on morning TV, and I am in a documentary called Happy Sad Men, which is about 5 men talking about their kind of, I guess, talking about negotiating and managing their internal worlds. And I talk about having anxiety and how I live with anxiety and how I manage it. And so it's quite interesting. There is a segment in that film where you see just the dynamics at work. You know, it's very mainstream morning television. And I guess we're very different people, you know, myself and the hosts. And it also made me, it felt like it really revealed to me Australia's relationship to art. And, you know, when people don't really know or have answers, like a lot of people's relationship to art is, I don't get it. So there's this relationship of getting, you know, the idea of getting something, it's something to be taken. But if people just kind of in some way just let ideas wash over them, or they, you know, they can sit in what's going around them and not worry about getting it, you know, something is often revealed or you have a different experience. So that was quite an eye-opening experience for me. I mean, I feel like they are brave things that, like, I must be, I mean, I'm so, I think I'm so, I have so much passion for the ideas that I have that I don't think about, I don't think about anxiety much when it comes to that. Like it gives me a sense of, like, I think my white costume is almost like a shield. It's a funny thing. I'm always trying to make sense of that. And then I also did an infomercial, which was with the Seven Network, and that was shown at West Space too. And so that was a lot more scripted. I developed a script, and there was these TV hosts from Channel 7, and we made an infomercial about Oda Wet Dog, which was quite funny. I wanted to talk also about Sheer Fantasy. So Sheer Fantasy was an exhibition I put together about 3 years ago at Campbelltown Arts Centre, and it really was 7 years in the making. It started with a conversation with Michael D'Agostino, who is the director there, saying something along the lines of, I think you should make a fantasy show, because he knows me and he knows my love for The Wizard of Oz and so forth. And so looking at escapism, looking at suburbia, because Campbelltown is quite a suburban built-up area, and looking at the theatrical tropes, and then kind of intersecting community and the real into this idea of fantasy. We work with Lorraine Cecilia from the UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Australia, who is a counsellor for those that have experienced trauma from alien abductions, believe it or not. And that we gave them this big table, this huge table, and they put out all their paraphernalia, and the club would occupy this space as their office almost, and they had business cards, and they were using it as an outreach in the middle of the gallery. And it was so wonderful to see, with a backdrop of Pat Larder's glitter works and green lighting it. And then it was quite a beautiful thing to see. And I guess I guess when I made that, it was kind of looking at this idea and this notion of confronting, because I'm a very nostalgic person and I like that about myself, but also I can see how that can be, can make you be stuck as a person, possibly. And I really also understand that once you confront a fantasy, when you walk through it, there's no real stepping back. You've kind of walked through it and there's no way of going back. So I kind of, I've recently thought about that more when looking at The Wizard of Oz, the film The Wizard of Oz, because ABC iView are putting together a series of small little documentaries of artists who collect called Accumulations. And my episode looks at my relationship with my grandmother, who was from the Ukraine and who was in war camps. She was the story that I heard constantly growing up, because I was brought up by my grandmother. My mother was working and my dad was working, and so I was often at my grandmother's with her. And she had a whole life before me, obviously, and she never spoke about it until she started looking after me, because my aunts and uncles and my mother have never heard half these stories. But I remember she was saying that she was braiding her sister's hair on her porch, and the German soldiers arrived and threw her into the truck, and she never saw her family again. And she was making clothing, I believe, or sewing for many, many years across Poland and Germany, and saw Hitler speak many times. And this narrative was really this narrative was really in my psyche as a young boy, and I was always looking for things to escape into. And with my grandmother and I, it was cinema. But, you know, there were limitations to that, because she said that if we were up at past 8 o'clock, the police would come knocking at your door. So lights had to be completely off. In fact, if you saw my grandmother's street if you saw my grandmother's house from the street, you will see that from the blinds, all these colours would be kind of escaping out. It looked like fireworks were going on inside. And she would have the volume right on low, and it was quite visceral. I remember the sounds of the cockroaches that she would step on while she was walking with bare feet through the fibre house. And we would watch The Wizard of Oz quite a lot. And that became the beginning of me, I think. I really started to see the world as an artist, I think, from watching that film. And yeah, I think there is a whole area of escapism that is part of my work. And I feel like maybe that is really what I offer people. And I like to confront people with art in a way that they stumble upon it. I think I'm most passionate about audiences that are outside of galleries. And I really think Teena has a good way of approaching things. She does have she's very sure of herself. But she does engage with kindness, and I've learnt a lot of that through her. So thank you for listening to that side of my talk.
Thank you, David. Such an interesting talk. And I think when we started talking about this, I was inviting you, in particular for the end of the year, to think through the ideas of humour and joy and well-being that are very present in your work. But I personally just learnt so much more about the ideas of audience and community and performance, the everyday class, and really that core question of where art can exist and what it can do for people. So thank you. It was brimming with ideas and knowledge. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And I was also going to say such an interesting sort of the personal background that you've brought to talk about where the practice has come from. And I think my favourite line was that exorcisms were a normal part of my week. What a wild younger life you've had. Yeah. Yeah. But definitely this idea of spirit and the absurd and escape, it makes so much sense. My first question being around reactions to your work. So like you've talked a lot about bringing the work outside of the gallery and also changing the everyday or bringing the familiar back in this sort of absurd way. I'm just wondering, and I'm also thinking about, like, you talked about your experience on the morning show, and I was working at West Space at the time you're doing that. So we very much saw that immediacy of when you put the practice in conversation in these mainstream media, the confusion that happens. And I'm just wondering, like giving that over to people, or like how I imagine some people come with you, other people struggle with the response, and I'm just wondering, does that matter, or what happens when that happens, or how you think about that moment of exchange and what happens in this new space?
I think Teena is really key in those interactions. She's so cute.
Yeah.
People kind of let their guard down, even though they see me in what they might deem a peculiar outfit or a peculiar setting. People are, like even just the recent Kaldor work where people behave a certain way in a gallery, and maybe there wasn't an expectation to have a dog in the space. Sometimes I just want to bring Teena into a gallery because it's not done, you know. I think when it comes to audiences, you're right, it's varied. Sometimes I'm strategic and I align myself with existing communities like the dog loving world. And, you know, when we launched my perfume, we also had the blue wheelers, which are they're dog-shaped, dog cleaning service on wheels. People can digest that. It's a dog, we're going to wash a dog. But then maybe, you know, and I think humour is something that, and clowning is a really strong component to making people feel that they don't need to have the answers, that the humour comes with the buffer. And it is, you know, I have really looked at that in my work as well.
And well, and having seen you, but I remember this being on the Day Show, you really do, you stay very happy, and there's a certain continuous joy that you bring to the role that you're playing alongside Teena as well, I would say.
Yeah, because I think like in that experience, the host, Carl Stefanovic, was, I don't know, well, I remember a lot of people said that it kind of, I remember one key thing was people likened it to the person at school that didn't quite fit in, and it was like you know, that it was like watching someone being bullied in the schoolyard to a degree, which I thought was quite a harsh way of looking at it. I don't think it was that extreme, but I remember Carl did stop towards the end of the interview and said, you know, you're a really nice person. And he really meant that. And I thought that was really quite a beautiful exchange in the moment of what felt like there was kind of this dynamic that people, I don't really know what was happening, but it was a strange interaction. And I think that humor and just letting it wash over you as well, like you know, it's like I'm not phased by what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Space, and we're here to sell a product, and that is perfume. And really, the joke's on you for allowing me to come on your show in the first place. Do it again. Yeah. No,
it's wonderful to see. Yeah, the places that you've taken the work and the confrontation or the opening up of where it can live and what it does for people. But I guess that leads into this other idea of talked a lot about points of connection. And I think it's interesting to talk to artists at this time about the way that their practice has changed or what it means in this new environment as a result of COVID, and I particularly this idea of of creating connections and I guess publics and audiences. What you're thinking about in this time, or how that's had any kind of immediate effect on the practice and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, it has been really hard, actually. I mean, I have been away from Teena personally. She's been up the coast with my mother because she'll live between, and usually we'll get to share Teena a lot more through the year. And because of COVID, I have really missed her. I feel like I have turned my attention on kind of renovating the house. I have brought out a lot of things that I have kept, like things that I've collected, and brought them out and started to enjoy them and tried to kind of feel like I need things to trigger inspiration. I have been thinking a lot about other projects. Like I'm really interested in making dog parks. So I am talking to a few people about that because I thought that would be a perfect way to kind of create new interactions with people, because I think that's what I really do miss about this time. I know artists where they have such socially engaged ways and approach to their work that they come to the studio and they don't feel like they can do anything. It's been a very strange time. It's always good to stop, and I think that I have wanted to stop for a little while as well, to just pause. It's not an ideal way to pause where I find myself today and where everyone finds himself, but I'm sure some positive things can happen from stopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.